Hi everybody, me again. I'm posting on here because it's probably going to be a little bit longer video than normal, and it's fairly personal because I'm going to talk about myself, and I suppose not everybody wants to hear it. So if you are watching this, it's because you're interested really, and it's me bleating on about suicide again, and the aftermath and the effects and how I've personally dealt with it. So just as a recap, my father ended his own life 36 years ago it is now. His memory was just last Tuesday, his anniversary. And one of my best friends, Lisa, she decided to stop living almost a year ago now, in October last year. So I had been struggling quite a lot with my dad's death at various points throughout my childhood, certainly as I became a teenager. So teenage years were really difficult, and I hadn't really proportioned it to that being the problem, but I was harbouring an awful lot of anger, and I suppose it's always been omnipresent really. It's kind of been in the back of my head, sometimes it's been right at the front of my head, and it's been really difficult to deal with. But there's been times in my life where I've dealt with it really well, and other times it's just come up and bit me on the butt. And Lisa's death just kind of crystallised everything for me. I was already struggling that year anyhow. Last year, for some reason, was the worst anniversary of my dad's death ever. And Lisa's passing just kind of compounded it all. So I recognised this, and I knew I was struggling to deal with everything really, because it was kind of making lots of things feel much more difficult. So I decided to find a new counsellor. I'm saying new counsellor. I've had counselling in the past, I've had psychotherapy in the past, mainly through Maggie's cancer centre, through my various cancer diagnoses, and that's been great, don't get me wrong. I don't have a bad word to say about that at all, but this to me just felt a little bit different. I felt like I needed a slightly different input, and I've spoken about my dad quite a lot throughout counselling sessions and psychotherapy sessions over the years, but I felt like I needed a fresh approach, and I was drawn to this particular place in Hexham called Sycamore Counselling. Made contact with them almost, I think it was a couple of days after Lisa had died actually, because thought I'm going to nip this in the bud, and had an initial session there with a lady called Jenny, and then she paired me with a counsellor called Vicky. They volunteer, so they're absolutely amazing folk. They're part of the church. They give their time for absolutely nothing, and they ask for donation, which I'm more than happy to give and have done. I've had sessions on and off. I'm going to say on and off because sometimes I've seen Vicky once a week, and sometimes I haven't seen her for a few months. But over the last year, I've had contact with her, and I've had sessions with her, and today marks my last session. I might tap in with her again, but I feel like I have done enough work with her to be okay with it. And what I mean by okay with it is, Dad's anniversary, like I said, was just last week, and it was the first one where, I'm probably going to cry now, it was the first one that I didn't cry. It was the first one where I didn't think back over the day that we found out that he died, because I do that, well, I did do that quite often. It was the first anniversary where I felt I could still function like a normal person and not be consumed by anxiety, by anger, by sadness. It kind of just went by. Like I gave myself times over that day. I was working, but I gave myself times where I was on my own to be able to reflect. And I did, but I did that with the magazine and a cup of tea. I'm starting to really nurture myself a lot more than I ever have really. And I think that's something else that's come out of the time that I've spent with Vicky. People who I love have been telling me to do this for years, and I've known I needed to do it to really start looking after myself more, taking a bit of time out and not feeling guilty about that. And that was a big thing for me to do, and it's actually only really something that's started to happen over the last couple of weeks, so hopefully I'm going to keep that up. But the after my first session with Vicky, things started to change. One, I would say she was quite interactive. So a lot of counsellors or a lot of people that do kind of talking therapies will reflect back on what you've said. They'll paraphrase, they'll give you your words back, which of course is great, and it shows understanding and listening. I get all of that. But Vicky actually offered some really constructive ideas, criticisms in a good way, like a really good way. And ultimately, after that first session, she made me think differently about my father's death. She didn't say anything that I've not heard before, certainly that I've not heard from my own mother back in the early days, but I listened and I really absorbed it, and she used different analogies to make me really think of my dad not as a father that left his child and his wife, but as a man that was struggling, that was so desperate. He felt that was the only way out. And so I spend all day at work expressing empathy towards my patients. I spend time expressing empathy towards my mother and Brian. You'll know about Brian if you follow me at all. My mum's next door neighbour, who I look after increasingly more, empathy with everybody, with my friends, with people on the street. I'm very empathetic. I think I feel quite deeply, and I worry about folk, But with Dad, I just fucking hated him, and that's terrible. And I hadn't quite realised how much that was eating me up. I mean, as a bit of a pretend Buddhist, I've dabbled now and again for a lot of years. There is no place for anger in our heart, because all it does is it stops us from living. And I knew this, but I just couldn't stop being angry about Dad. And Vicky made me, just the way that she talked about it, the way that she talked about suicide, and she actually told me to think about a friend of mine. Imagine if he was my dad feeling that way, a male friend, how would I approach it? And I said, well, I would give him a hug, and I would tell him that I'm there for him as he's made, and everything's gonna be okay. And she said, give your dad a hug. Fuck no. Obviously figuratively speaking. And that was it. That was it. That made me that made me really sad for him, not for us. Still really sad for us, left behind, but that made me really sad for him, and that made me try and think about how he felt. Very clever man, very intelligent man, had an excellent job, had a home, had a family, had a wife, had a child, had brothers and a sister, had people that loved him, lots of friends. He got himself into a situation he couldn't get himself out of, and I can kind of recognise that now, and I can express feelings towards him that I've never really had before. So it was absolutely instrumental, that one session. And almost when I went back for the second session, Vicky said, are you fixed now, then are you sorted? And of course I wasn't, but that really was the catalyst, and it was the beginning of me starting to think of things differently, because actually I'd already thought that way about Lisa. I had a lot of empathy and sympathy towards her, and I knew how much she was struggling, because this wasn't something out of the blue for Lisa, whereas it was for my dad. Anyway, I suppose what I'm trying to say is I'm quite good at getting help, and that's not me like, oh, I'm amazing. It's just I'm very self-aware. I know when I'm struggling, I know when I need help, I know when I need to retreat, I know when I need to step back, I know when I need to give myself a kick up the bum. I am very, very self-aware. I don't know how, because my mother isn't, to be fair, so I don't know where that's come from, and I don't think my dad was either, sadly, but that's me. I am fucking on it like a car bonnet, really. Nothing really gets past me in terms of my own feelings and emotions, and I know how I am and what I'm doing. So anyhow, what I'm trying to say is, if you feel like you're swimming in a sea of shit, which you very well might be, there are avenues out there that can help you to find a raft, to find an anchor, to kind of work your way through it. Your problems aren't going to go away. Christ, it's taken me 36 years to get to this point. Hopefully it won't take you as long. But if you are feeling desperate, if you are feeling lonely, it's really, really difficult to ask for help. And maybe you don't ask for help. Maybe you just start talking a little bit. So when people ask you if you're okay, maybe you say, actually, you know, I'm really not. And I hope by me telling you that I'm not okay a lot of the times, I feel like I'm as okay as I have been for a long time now, but I'm a work in progress, and there will be times again in the future where I feel like abject shit, and I might have to seek out a little bit of assistance. I might have to talk a little bit more. I might have to not talk at all. I might have to just go away and deal with things myself. But I know that my life is absolutely worth living, and that I mean a lot to a lot of people, and you do too. So don't, if you can, don't just think it's all going to go away by solving your own problems through a means that is ending it all, because I can promise you it might take away your problems, but it will just give those problems to somebody else, to the people that love you, and they don't ever really get over that. They just learn to deal with it, and here I am, you know. Very good example of that. I've been functioning really quite well for an awful lot of years, and I still am, but it's haunted me a lot, and it's only now that I'm really starting to come to terms with it. So mind, yeah, first port of call maybe for a lot of people. There's loads of charities out there. If you're not sure of what to do, where to go, get in touch and I can try and signpost you. It's not my job, by the way. I'm a physio. Yes, I signpost people in clinic. I'm not taking any responsibility for you, but if you need a little bit of assistance or a little bit of signposting and you don't want to ask anybody that you know, then get in touch, man. You know, I don't have infinite resources, but I can share what I know, and hopefully that might help you too. So yeah, you've got to keep your pecker up, as my mum would say. You really have, and you have to also maybe think of things that are good in your life as opposed to just really focusing on the shit bits, because there will be good bits, and it might just be that you've had a nice hot cup of tea this morning with a I was going to say slice of cake. Who has cake for breakfast? Me. But yeah, sometimes focusing on the good things might seem like a really small way of kind of engulfing massive problems, but it's the start. So yeah, just look after yourself, try and be a little bit mindful and aware of what's going on, and stop yourself before it gets to the point of no return. Take care. Bye.